Commander Zixtal stood before the massive viewing screen in the Confederation's Central Command Station. His blue skin shimmered under the soft lights as he studied the data streaming across multiple displays. The information came from deep space sensors that had detected something unusual near the outer rim of known space. Another new species, his aide Veltar announced, walking up behind him with a data tablet in her four-fingered hands. They call themselves humans. From a planet they name Earth. Zixtal's large black eyes focused on the tablet. The images showed bipedal creatures with pale pink or brown skin, small eyes, and no visible natural weapons. They looked soft, almost fragile compared to most species in the galaxy. No claws, no fangs, no armor plating. Even their ship seemed basic and crude. Have they achieved faster-than-light travel? Zixtal asked. Yes, sir. Just recently. Their first ship arrived in the Kepler system 3 days ago. They seemed friendly and curious about making contact. The Confederation had dealt with hundreds of new species over the past 1,000 years. Most followed the same pattern. They achieved spaceflight, explored their local systems, then eventually made contact with the galactic community. Some were aggressive at first, but they all learned to follow the rules eventually. The rules were simple and had kept peace for centuries. When species disagreed about territory, resources, or trade, they settled disputes through formal combat. Not the brutal, deadly fighting that primitive worlds used, but civilized duels with energy weapons set to stun. The loser would be knocked unconscious, wake up a few hours later, and accept the winner's terms. Clean, simple, and nobody died. What do we know about their military capabilities? Zixtal asked, scrolling through more data. Veltar pulled up another screen. Very basic. They use primitive projectile weapons that fire small metal pieces. Their ships have simple missile systems. Nothing that could threaten our shields or armor. They appeared to be a peaceful species focused on exploration and science. This matched what Zixtal expected. The humans looked like they would fit well into the Confederation structure. Perhaps they could handle administrative work or research. Their small size and weak appearance suggested they were not meant for combat roles. Arrange a first contact meeting, Zixtal ordered. Standard diplomatic protocols. Let's welcome them to civilized space. 3 days later, the human ship arrived at the Confederation's meeting station. Zixtal waited in the main conference room, along with representatives from 12 other species. The room was designed to make new species feel comfortable, with adjustable lighting and atmosphere controls. The airlock opened, and 5 humans walked in. They wore dark blue uniforms that looked clean but simple. The leader was a female with short brown hair and calm brown eyes. She moved with confidence but showed no signs of aggression. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Endeavor, she said in perfect galactic standard language. Her voice was steady and professional. We thank the Confederation for this opportunity to meet. Zixtal stepped forward, his translator device making soft humming sounds as it worked. Welcome, Captain Chen. I am Commander Zixtal of the Galactic Confederation. We are pleased to meet your species. The next few hours went exactly as Zixtal expected. Captain Chen answered questions about human society, technology, and goals. The humans seemed interested in trade, cultural exchange, and peaceful exploration. They asked intelligent questions about Confederation laws and customs. We want to learn your ways, Captain Chen said during one discussion. Humanity has had conflicts in our past, but we've learned that cooperation works better than fighting. Veltar nodded approvingly. The Confederation has maintained peace for over 1,000 years through our legal system. When disputes arise, we settle them through formal combat rather than war. Captain Chen looked interested. Combat? Civilized duels, Zixtal explained. 2 champions fight with standardized weapons set to non-lethal settings. The winner's side gets what they want. The loser accepts the decision. No deaths, no destruction, no lasting harm. That sounds very reasonable, Captain Chen replied. Much better than the wars we used to fight. Zixtal was pleased. The humans understood the value of civilization over barbarism. They would fit in well. The meeting ended with agreements for trade discussions and cultural exchange programs. The humans would be given territory in an uninhabited system to establish their first galactic colony. Everything proceeded smoothly. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Captain Chen turned back to Zixtal. Commander, we're very grateful for this warm welcome. We look forward to learning from more advanced civilizations like yours. After the humans left, Veltar approached Zixtal with a satisfied expression. They seem perfect for integration. Peaceful, intelligent, and eager to follow our rules. Agreed, Zixtal said, watching the human ship depart through the viewing port. Log them as a Class C species, suitable for administrative and research roles. No military threat assessment needed. Over the following weeks, reports came in about human activities in their new system. They were building research stations, mining asteroids, and establishing trade routes. Everything normal for a new species learning to navigate galactic society. The only unusual reports came from trading captains who had visited human ships. They mentioned seeing humans carrying strange weapons and wearing unusual armor during ceremonial occasions. When asked, the humans explained these were traditional military dress and ceremonial arms from their planet's history. Zixtal filed these reports without concern. Many species kept ceremonial weapons from their primitive past. The Karathi still wore ancient bone armor during festivals. The Velnari carried ornamental swords that had not been used in battle for centuries. It was normal for species to maintain cultural traditions even after joining civilized society. 3 months after first contact, everything changed. The Krill Empire, a newer addition to the Confederation, filed a territorial dispute against the humans. The Krill claimed that the human colony system contained resources that belonged to them, based on ancient exploration rights. It was a weak claim, but legal under Confederation law. Zixtal received the formal challenge request and sighed. The Krill were always trying to expand their territory through legal loopholes. They had joined the Confederation only 50 years ago, and still thought like conquerors rather than civilized beings. Under Confederation law, the dispute would be settled by single combat between champions. The Krill had chosen General Thakmor, their finest warrior. He had won 17 formal duels and had never been defeated. Zixtal sent the challenge notification to Captain Chen, explaining the legal requirements and combat rules. He expected the humans to either back down or choose their strongest individual, for what would likely be a quick defeat. Captain Chen's response surprised him. "We accept the challenge," her message said. "We request permission to bring military observers to learn your combat traditions. We want to understand how civilized species handle these matters." Zixtal approved the request. It was normal for new species to want to learn proper procedures. He was pleased that the humans were taking such an academic approach to their likely defeat. When the human military ship arrived, Zixtal went to greet them personally. He wanted to explain the combat rules and help them understand what to expect. What he saw when the airlock opened made him pause in confusion. 20 humans walked out wearing black armor that looked nothing like the ceremonial gear he had expected. They moved with a precision that made Zixtal's skin crawl. Their weapons were not ornamental but clearly functional. Their faces were calm but alert in a way that reminded him of predators. Captain Chen was among them, but she looked different now. Gone was the diplomatic smile. In its place was something cold and focused. "Commander Zixtal," she said, her voice the same but somehow carrying a different weight. "We're ready to observe your combat procedures." Zixtal stared at the humans, a strange feeling growing in his chest. For the first time since meeting them, he wondered if the Confederation had made a mistake. The formal combat arena floated in space between 3 massive battleships. Representatives from over 30 species had come to watch the duel between the Krill Empire and the newcomer humans. Most expected a quick fight followed by humans learning their place in the galactic order. General Thakmor of the Krill stood in the center of the arena, his red skin gleaming under the artificial lights. He was nearly 8 feet tall with natural bone plates covering his arms and chest. In his hands he held a standard Confederation energy rifle, its power setting locked to stun mode as required by law. Around the arena's edges, hundreds of alien spectators watched from behind energy barriers. Combat duels were popular entertainment, especially when they involved new species. The betting favors were heavily against the humans. Zixtal sat in the command viewing area with other high-ranking officials. Beside him, Veltar studied her data tablet with growing confusion. "Commander, I've been reviewing the human military records they provided," she said quietly. "Something doesn't make sense. What do you mean?" Zixtal asked, not taking his eyes off the arena where technicians were making final preparations. Their casualty numbers from past conflicts. They list millions of deaths in something called World War II and hundreds of thousands in other conflicts. But they also describe these as relatively small wars by their standards. Zixtal frowned. That must be a translation error. No civilized species would have casualties in the millions. Before Veltar could respond, Captain Chen entered the arena. She wore the same black armor Zixtal had seen when her ship arrived, but now he could see it more clearly. The armor was not ceremonial. It was covered in pouches, attachment points, and what looked like functional equipment. In her hands she carried a weapon that made several alien spectators gasp. It was clearly a projectile weapon, but not like the simple firearms they had seen in human historical records. This one was larger, more complex, with multiple attachments and modifications. "Is that weapon approved for formal combat?" asked Ambassador Korth of the Milani Republic. Zixtal checked his data tablet. According to their filing, it's a standard infantry rifle set to non-lethal configuration. Our weapons inspectors cleared it yesterday. "It doesn't look non-lethal," Veltar muttered. In the arena, the dual referee, a tall Vindari with gray skin, approached both combatants. The Vindari had overseen formal combat for over 2 centuries and had never seen a fatality. "Combatants, you understand the rules," the referee announced, his voice carried throughout the arena by speakers. "This is a formal duel to settle territorial dispute. Standard energy weapons, stun setting only. First combatant to fall unconscious loses. Any questions?" General Thakmore nodded confidently. He had fought 17 duels and won them all. Humans were small and weak. This would be over quickly. Captain Chen raised her hand. "What exactly do you mean by first to fall unconscious?" The referee looked puzzled. "When the stun energy renders you unable to continue fighting, you collapse, become unconscious, and the duel ends. And if someone falls but remains conscious, that doesn't happen," the referee said slowly. "Stun energy renders targets unconscious. That's how it works," Captain Chen nodded. "Understood. What about movement during the fight?" General Thakmore laughed, a harsh grating sound. "What movement? We stand, we aim, we fire. First good hit wins. You just stand in the open? This is formal combat, not some primitive brawl," Thakmore said with disgust. "We are civilized warriors, not animals." Captain Chen looked around the arena as if seeing it for the first time. It was a simple circular space with good lighting and clear lines of sight. No cover, no obstacles, just an open area for 2 combatants to face each other. "Interesting," she said quietly. The referee moved to the edge of the arena. "Combatants, take your positions." Thakmore walked to the center of the arena and stood with his feet planted firmly. He held his energy rifle at the ready position, exactly as combat manuals prescribed. Across from him, Captain Chen moved to her starting position, but instead of standing still, she kept moving. She walked in a small circle, studying the arena's layout. "Human, stand still," Thakmore called out. "The duel begins when we're both in position." "I am in position," Captain Chen replied, continuing to move. In the viewing area, Zixtal felt his unease growing. "Why isn't she standing still?" "Maybe it's a human ritual," Veltar suggested, but her voice sounded uncertain. The referee raised his hand. "Combatants ready? Begin." General Thakmore immediately raised his rifle and fired. The blue energy bolt streaked across the arena toward where Captain Chen had been standing. But she wasn't there anymore. The moment the referee said, "Begin," Captain Chen had dropped into a crouch and rolled to her left. The energy bolt passed harmlessly over her head. Thakmore stared in confusion. This wasn't how duels worked. Combatants stood and traded shots until someone fell. They didn't. "Move around," he fired again, leading his target this time. But Captain Chen had anticipated this and dove behind one of the arena's support pillars. The energy bolt struck the pillar and dissipated harmlessly. "She's hiding," someone in the crowd shouted. "That's not honorable. Using cover is against the spirit of formal combat," another voice called. But the referee checked his rule tablet and found no specific prohibition against movement or using the arena's features. The rules assumed combatants would stand and fight traditionally. General Thakmore advanced toward Captain Chen's position, firing repeatedly. Each shot hit where she had been, but she kept moving. She rolled, crawled, and sprinted between cover points that weren't meant to be cover. "Stand and fight," Thakmore roared, his red skin darkening with anger. "Face me like a warrior." Captain Chen's voice came from behind a maintenance panel. "I am fighting." In the viewing area, the alien spectators were becoming increasingly agitated. This wasn't how formal combat worked. Where was the honor? Where was the dignity? The human was acting like some kind of animal. "She's cheating," declared Admiral Keth of the Zorian Navy. "This isn't proper combat behavior." "Actually," Veltar said, reading from her tablet, "I've been reviewing human military history. This appears to be standard human combat doctrine. They call it tactics and tactics?" Zixtal asked, "Using terrain, movement, and positioning to gain advantage over an enemy. According to their records, all human military training emphasizes these concepts." The crowd was growing restless. Some spectators were calling for the duel to be stopped. Others wanted the human disqualified for unsporting behavior. But the rules were clear and Captain Chen had broken none of them. General Thakmor was becoming frustrated. He had fired 18 shots and hit nothing but arena equipment. The human kept moving, never staying in one place long enough for a clear shot. This was supposed to be simple. "Stand, aim, fire, win. What's wrong with her?" he called to the referee. "Why won't she fight properly?" The referee had no answer. In all his years overseeing formal combat, he had never seen anything like this. Then Captain Chen did something that made the entire arena fall silent. She fired back. The sound was wrong. Instead of the clean humming of energy weapons, there was a sharp, violent crack that echoed through the arena. The projectile struck General Thakmor's energy rifle and shattered it into pieces. Thakmor stood there staring at the destroyed weapon in his hands. This wasn't supposed to happen. Weapons didn't break in formal combat. The energy fields prevented that kind of damage. "My rifle," he said stupidly. Captain Chen stepped out from behind her cover, her weapon trained on the Krill general. "Do you yield?" "Yield?" Thakmor looked around the arena in confusion. But I'm not unconscious. The fight isn't over. Your weapon is destroyed. You cannot continue fighting." "But that's not how it works." In the viewing area, Zixtal realized that everything he thought he knew about humans was wrong. This wasn't a primitive species learning galactic customs. This was something else entirely. Something that understood war in ways the galaxy had forgotten. General Thakmor stared at the broken pieces of his rifle scattered across the arena floor. In 2 centuries of formal combat, no weapon had ever been destroyed during a duel. Energy rifles were protected by containment fields that prevented damage. Yet somehow, the human's primitive projectile had shattered his weapon completely. "This is impossible," he said, looking at the twisted metal and crystal fragments. "Energy rifles don't break." Captain Chen kept her weapon pointed at him, though she had not moved closer. "Your weapon is non-functional. You cannot continue the duel. Do you yield?" Thakmor looked around the arena desperately. "The rules say the duel ends when someone falls unconscious. I'm still conscious, but you can't fight back. That's not how it works." Thakmor's voice rose to a shout. "We trade shots until someone falls. You can't just destroy my weapon." In the viewing area, chaos was erupting among the spectators. Representatives from dozens of species were on their feet, shouting in confusion and anger. The betting pools had collapsed because no one had considered this scenario. "This is cheating," Admiral Keth declared, his forearms waving in agitation. "She's violating the spirit of formal combat." Zixtal frantically checked the official rules on his data tablet. Actually, there's no rule against destroying an opponent's weapon. The rules just specify the types of weapons allowed and the victory conditions. "Then the rules are wrong," someone shouted from the crowd. Veltar was reading through human military records with growing alarm. "Commander, I think we need to see this. The humans have detailed documentation about something called rules of engagement and combat effectiveness. This isn't random behavior." On the arena floor, the referee approached both combatants. His gray skin had taken on a pale tint that indicated severe stress among his species. "This is unprecedented," he announced to the crowd. "The rules state that combat continues until one combatant is rendered unconscious. The Krill general remains conscious, but his weapon is destroyed." "So what happens now?" Captain Chen asked. I don't know. This situation has never occurred." General Thakmor suddenly charged at Captain Chen with his bare hands. If he couldn't use his rifle, he would win through physical combat. The Krill were larger and stronger than humans. He could overpower her easily. Captain Chen watched him approach for a moment, then did something that made the entire arena gasp in horror. She shot him. The crack of her weapon echoed through the arena again. This time, the projectile struck Thakmor in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing to the floor. Blue blood spread across the arena's white surface. The silence that followed was absolute. For several seconds, no one moved or spoke. Then the screaming started. "She killed him!" Someone in the crowd shrieked. "Murder! This is murder! Stop the duel! Stop it now!" But General Thakmor was not dead. He lay on the arena floor, holding his wounded shoulder and moaning in pain. Blue blood seeped between his fingers, but he was very much alive. Captain Chen approached him carefully, her weapon still ready. When she reached him, she knelt down and examined his wound. The projectile passed through muscle tissue without hitting major blood vessels or organs. She announced to the arena, "He will need medical attention, but the injury is not life-threatening." "You shot me," Thakmor gasped, staring at her in shock. "You actually shot me, yes, but weapons are set to stun. They don't cause injuries. They don't draw blood. Mine wasn't set to stun." The referee rushed over, his medical scanner beeping frantically as he examined Thakmor's wound. "This is a penetrating injury. Actual tissue damage. How is this possible?" Captain Chen stood up, her weapon now pointing at the ground. "General Thakmor is conscious but unable to continue fighting due to his injury. Does this satisfy the victory conditions? This has never..." The referee looked around helplessly. "Medical team to the arena. Emergency medical team!" As alien medics rushed in to treat Thakmor, Captain Chen walked to the center of the arena. Her voice carried clearly to every spectator. "I claim victory in this formal combat on behalf of humanity. The territorial dispute is settled in our favor according to Confederation law." In the viewing area, Zixtal felt something cold settling in his stomach. "Veltar, pull up those human military records again. All of them, sir. Everything. Their weapon specifications, their casualty reports, their tactical manuals. Everything we dismissed as primitive or ceremonial." Veltar's fingers worked frantically on her data tablet. As information scrolled across the screen, her skin began to change color with shock. "Commander, their weapons, the ones we thought were primitive projectile throwers, they're not primitive at all." "What do you mean?" "They're designed to kill. Not stun, not disable, kill. Every single weapon in their arsenal has one purpose, to cause maximum damage to living targets." Zixtal stared at the data. Bullet velocities, penetration values, wound ballistics. Terms he had never seen before because no civilized species needed such things. "Look at this," Veltar continued, her voice shaking. "Their basic infantry rifle can punch through 6 inches of steel armor. Their explosives can level city blocks. They have weapons that can kill from miles away. That's impossible. No species would create such things. They call it warfare, Commander. Real warfare, not formal combat or ceremonial duels. Actual fighting where the goal is to kill your enemies before they kill you." On the arena floor, medics had stabilized General Thakmor and were preparing to move him to a medical facility. The wound was exactly as Captain Chen had said, serious but not fatal. She had aimed precisely to disable without killing. Ambassador Korth approached the viewing area, his tentacles writhing with agitation. "Zixtal, this cannot be allowed to stand. The human violated every principle of civilized combat." "Actually," Zixtal said slowly, still reading the human military data, "she followed the rules exactly. She used an approved weapon to render her opponent unable to continue fighting. She shot him. With a kinetic projectile. That caused actual physical injury. The rules don't prohibit kinetic projectiles or physical injury. They just specify that weapons must be non-lethal configuration. She didn't kill him. But she could have. That was exactly what terrified Zixtal. Captain Chen could have killed General Thakmor easily. She had chosen not to. The precision required to wound without killing suggested a level of weapons training that the galaxy had never seen. Captain Chen had walked over to where the alien spectators were gathered. Her expression was calm, professional, and completely without remorse. "I request immediate medical evaluation for General Thakmor," she said to the referee. "The wound should heal completely with proper treatment." You planned this," the referee said, staring at her. "You knew exactly what would happen. I knew the probable outcomes of various tactical approaches, yes. Tactical approaches?" Ambassador Korth pushed forward, his voice rising. "This was supposed to be an honorable duel." "It was a duel. We won. You brought actual weapons to a ceremonial combat." Captain Chen looked genuinely confused. "You asked us to settle a dispute through combat. We brought standard combat equipment." "Standard? Veltar appeared beside Zixtal, her data tablet in hand. Captain Chen, what exactly do you consider standard combat equipment? Basic infantry loadout, small arms, armor, communications gear. Nothing heavy. Nothing heavy? Captain Chen gestured toward her ship, visible through the arena's transparent walls. No artillery, no armor vehicles, no air support. Just personal weapons and equipment. Zixtal felt his world tilting. Captain Chen, when your species fights wars, how many casualties do you typically expect? That depends on the scale of the conflict and the strategic objectives. Small engagements might have dozens of casualties. Major wars can have millions. Millions? The word came out as a whisper. World War II had over 70 million casualties. That was considered a large war, but not the largest we could fight with current technology. The arena fell silent again. 70 million casualties. The entire Confederation had not seen 70 million deaths from all causes in the past 500 years. Zixtal looked at Captain Chen standing calmly among the terrified alien representatives, and realized that everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare was wrong. They had been playing games while humans perfected the art of killing. The medical bay on the Confederation station was in chaos. General Thakmore lay on a treatment table, surrounded by alien doctors who had never dealt with a projectile wound before. Their medical scanners, designed for energy burns and simple injuries, struggled to understand the damage pattern. The projectile created a wound channel through muscle tissue, Dr. Yethrol explained to the gathered officials. Her 6 arms moved frantically over the medical displays. It's unlike anything in our databases. The kinetic energy caused tissue disruption in ways we've never seen. Zixtal stood beside the treatment table, watching the medical team work. General Thakmore was conscious but clearly in pain. His red skin had taken on a pale shade that indicated shock among his species. Will he recover? Zixtal asked. Physically, yes. The human was correct. No vital organs were damaged. But, Commander, I've never seen anything like this wound pattern. It's as if the weapon was specifically designed to cause maximum tissue damage while avoiding fatal injury. Captain Chen entered the medical bay, still wearing her combat armor. The alien medical staff stepped back nervously as she approached the treatment table. How is he? She asked Dr. Yethrol. He'll live, no thanks to you, the doctor replied coldly. What kind of barbaric weapon causes injuries like this? A standard kinetic round fired from an infantry rifle. The projectile is designed to transfer maximum energy while maintaining trajectory stability. Dr. Yethrol stared at her. You have weapons specifically designed to cause wounds? All weapons are designed to cause wounds. That's what weapons do. The simple statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Ambassador Korth, who had been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. Captain Chen, we need to understand what your species means by standard combat equipment. Could you provide a complete inventory? Of course. Captain Chen activated a small device on her wrist. This is a basic infantry loadout for one soldier. Primary weapon, assault rifle capable of selective fire with armor-piercing rounds. Secondary weapon, sidearm with hollow point ammunition. Fragmentation grenades for area denial. Smoke grenades for concealment. Combat knife for close quarters. Body armor rated for small arms fire. With each item she listed, the aliens in the room grew more horrified. What are hollow point rounds? Veltar asked, though her voice suggested she didn't really want to know. Projectiles designed to expand on impact, creating larger wound channels and transferring more kinetic energy to the target. And armor-piercing rounds? Projectiles designed to penetrate protective equipment and maintain lethality against armored targets. Ambassador Korth's tentacles had curled into tight spirals, a sign of extreme distress among his species. Captain, these weapons, they're designed to kill efficiently. Yes. But why? Why would you need such things? Captain Chen looked genuinely puzzled by the question. Because the enemy is also trying to kill you. War is about destroying your opponent's ability to fight while preserving your own forces. But surely there are more civilized ways to resolve conflicts. Diplomacy is always preferable, but when diplomacy fails, you fight to win. Zixtal activated his personal communicator. Security, I need a priority communication link to the Confederation Council. Emergency session required. As he waited for the connection, General Thakmor spoke from the treatment table. His voice was weak but clear. Captain Chen, why didn't you kill me? You could have. Killing you wouldn't have served any strategic purpose. The objective was to win the duel, not eliminate you personally. But if this had been a real war, Captain Chen met his eyes. If this had been a real war, General, you would never have seen me coming. The cold certainty in her voice made every alien in the room shiver. The communication system activated, and the holographic forms of the 12 Confederation Council members appeared around the medical bay. Their various species represented the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Council leader Morgthen, an ancient being whose species had achieved spaceflight 3,000 years ago, spoke first. Commander Zixtal, we understand there was an incident during the formal combat with the humans. Council leader, we have a situation that requires immediate attention. The humans, they're not what we thought they were. Explain. Zixtal gestured toward Captain Chen. They don't engage in formal combat as we understand it. They practice something they call warfare, actual fighting, where the goal is to kill enemies as efficiently as possible. Council member Vexari of the hegemony leaned forward. That's impossible. No civilized species would develop such practices. Captain Chen, Zixtal said, please explain to the Council what human military doctrine entails. Captain Chen stepped forward, addressing the holographic council with the same professional demeanor she had maintained throughout the crisis. Human military doctrine is based on the principle that conflict is a contest of will backed by force. The side that can inflict more damage while sustaining less damage wins. We train to operate in environments where the enemy is actively trying to kill us, so all our equipment and tactics are designed around that assumption. You train to kill other humans? Council member Yothka asked in horror. We train to defeat enemies, yes. Human history includes thousands of wars, from small tribal conflicts to global struggles involving hundreds of millions of people. But surely your species has evolved beyond such barbarism. We've learned to use diplomacy and cooperation when possible, but we maintain military capabilities because other humans also have military capabilities. The threat of force prevents conflicts as often as the use of force settles them. Council leader Morgthen was quiet for a long moment. Captain Chen, what would happen if humanity decided to conquer other species in the galaxy? That would depend on their military capabilities and strategic resources. But conquest isn't our objective. We want to trade, learn, and explore. But you could conquer? Captain Chen considered the question carefully. Based on what I've observed of Confederation military technology and doctrine, human forces would have significant tactical advantages in most combat scenarios. The council chamber fell silent. Then Council member Zixolt of the Trade Federation spoke up. What kind of advantages? Your weapons are designed for formal duels, not battlefield effectiveness. Your tactics assume honorable opponents following agreed rules. Your soldiers train for ceremonial combat, not survival under fire. Your entire military philosophy is based on minimal casualties and preserving honor. And human military philosophy? Victory through superior firepower, mobility, and tactics. We assume the enemy will use every possible advantage, so we prepare for the worst-case scenario. Dr. Yethral, who had been listening while treating General Thakmor, suddenly spoke up. Captain, I've been reviewing human medical records. Your species has developed extensive trauma surgery techniques, prosthetic replacements, and psychological treatment for something called combat stress. Yes. Why would you need such things unless you expected large numbers of wounded soldiers? Because war produces casualties. We've learned to treat the wounded and return them to duty when possible. The implications sank in slowly. The humans didn't just practice warfare. They had developed entire medical and psychological systems to support prolonged conflict. They planned for massive casualties and had procedures for dealing with them. Council leader Morgthan's image flickered as he consulted with advisors off-screen. When he returned, his expression was grave. Captain Chen, does humanity have any interest in expanding its territory through military force? Not at this time. We're more interested in establishing trade relationships and learning about galactic civilization. At this time? Captain Chen paused. Circumstances could change depending on how we're treated by other species. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Be reasonable, or face the consequences. Zixtal realized that the galaxy had just learned it was no longer alone at the top of the food chain. 6 months after the duel that changed everything, the Confederation's military academy hosted its first class of alien cadets, learning human combat doctrine. The training facility on Kepler Station had been completely redesigned to accommodate what humans called realistic combat scenarios. Zixtal stood in the observation deck, watching human instructors teach young aliens how to move under fire. The students crawled through mud, jumped over obstacles, and practiced shooting while running. It was nothing like the formal ceremonial combat training the galaxy had known for centuries. "This still feels wrong," Veltar said beside him. She wore the new military uniform the Confederation had adopted. Practical, durable clothing instead of the decorative dress uniforms they used to wear. "Wrong or not, it's necessary," Zixtal replied, watching a human sergeant demonstrate proper cover techniques to a group of terrified alien recruits. The Krill Empire withdrew their territorial claims within a week of the duel. 3 other aggressive species have suddenly become very interested in peaceful negotiations. Below them, Sergeant Martinez, a compact human female with scars on her arms, was explaining basic tactics to the alien students. "Combat is not about honor," she said, her voice carrying clearly to the observation deck. "Combat is about going home alive while making sure the enemy doesn't. Everything else is secondary." A young Karathi cadet raised his 4 arms. "But Sergeant, what about fighting with dignity?" "Dignity doesn't stop bullets, Cadet Vorth. Being dead with dignity is still being dead." The concept was still difficult for most species to accept. Thousands of years of ritualized combat had created a galaxy where military concepts like survival and victory at any cost were foreign ideas. Captain Chen entered the observation deck, now wearing the insignia of a Confederation military advisor. Her promotion had been unanimous, partly because she was qualified, but mostly because no one wanted to risk making her angry. "How are they adapting?" she asked Zixtal, slowly. "The physical training is challenging for species that evolved in low-gravity environments. The psychological aspects are even more difficult." "What do you mean?" Veltar answered. "Human military training assumes that soldiers will face situations where they might die. Our species never developed that mindset because formal combat doesn't involve real danger." Captain Chen nodded. "It's a fundamental difference in thinking. Humans learn to function under stress because we evolved in an environment where stress usually meant death was possible." On the training floor, the alien cadets were practicing something called fire and movement, one group providing covering fire while another group advanced. The concept of working together to kill enemies was still alien to most species. "The Milani delegation arrived this morning," Zixtal informed Captain Chen. "They want to discuss defensive agreements." "Third species this month," Chen replied. "Word is spreading about human combat capabilities." The galaxy's response to learning about human warfare had been varied but predictable. Aggressive species had become suddenly diplomatic. Peaceful species had requested human protection. Everyone wanted to avoid being on the wrong side of human weapons. Admiral Korth entered the observation deck, his tentacles moving in patterns that indicated deep concern. "Captain Chen, we've received disturbing reports from our intelligence services." "What kind of reports?" "Several species have begun developing new weapons. The Zorvak Imperium has started research into kinetic projectile systems. The Velnari Coalition is experimenting with explosive devices." Captain Chen frowned. That was inevitable. Once you know something is possible, it becomes easier to develop. "Is this going to start an arms race?" "It already has. The question is whether you want humans to help you stay ahead of it or figure it out on your own." The implications were clear. Humanity's military knowledge was now the galaxy's most valuable resource. Species that aligned with humans would gain access to advanced weapons and tactics. Those that didn't would fall behind in the new military reality. Zixtal activated his communicator. "Council meeting in 1 hour. Priority Alpha." As the afternoon session began, Zixtal found himself in the strange position of advocating for closer ties with the species that had terrified the galaxy. The human military advisors had proven invaluable in understanding the new threats emerging across known space. The Krill Empire has developed crude projectile weapons based on captured fragments from Captain Chen's rifle, he reported to the assembled council. Intelligence suggests they're planning to test them against the hegemony border colonies. Council leader Morgthon's ancient features showed strain. How long before they achieve parity with human weapons? Captain Chen estimates 50 to 70 years for basic kinetic weapons, assuming they have access to human technology samples. Longer for advanced systems, and if they don't have human technology, 2 to 3 centuries, possibly longer. The mathematics were simple but stark. Humanity had a several-century head start in weapons development. Any species that wanted to catch up would need human help or risk being conquered by those who received it. There's another issue, Veltar added. The Confederation's traditional peacekeeping methods don't work against species using human-style weapons. Energy shields that stop stun blasts are useless against kinetic projectiles. Captain Chen, attending the council meeting via hologram from the Academy, provided her assessment. The galaxy is entering a period of military evolution. Traditional formal combat is obsolete. Species will either adapt to reality-based warfare or be conquered by those who do. What do you recommend? Council leader Morgthon asked. Complete military restructuring. Replace formal combat with effective doctrine. Train for real combat scenarios. Develop weapons and tactics based on battlefield effectiveness rather than honor codes. The council was quiet for several minutes. Finally, council member Yothka spoke up. If we do this, we become like you. We become a galaxy that settles disputes through violence. You already settle disputes through violence, Captain Chen replied. You just call it formal combat and pretend it's civilized. The only difference is that your violence doesn't work. That evening, Zixtal found himself in the station's observation lounge, looking out at the stars. The galaxy looked the same as it always had, but everything had changed. Peace had been maintained for centuries through mutual agreement that war was unnecessary. Now they knew it was maintained because no one knew how to fight effectively. Captain Chen joined him at the viewing port, carrying 2 cups of what humans called coffee. Regrets? She asked, offering him one of the cups. About first contact with humanity? Sometimes. He sipped the bitter human beverage which he had grown to appreciate. But mostly I wonder what would have happened if we'd met a human military fleet instead of your exploration vessel. Different people, different circumstances. We might have seen you as a threat instead of potential friends, and then, Captain Chen was quiet for a moment. Then this conversation would be happening after a very different kind of first contact. Through the viewing port, they could see human ships patrolling the space around the station. The Confederation had requested the patrols after reports of pirates in nearby systems. The pirates had disappeared within days of the human ships arriving. The galaxy is safer now, Zixtal said eventually. For now, safety is something you have to maintain, not something you achieve once and keep forever. Is that a human philosophy? It's a survival philosophy. Humans learned it because we had to. Now you're learning it because the galaxy is no longer as safe as you thought it was. Zixtal nodded, understanding. The galaxy had been peaceful because everyone agreed to be peaceful. But peace based on mutual agreement only lasted until someone decided not to agree. Peace based on the knowledge that breaking it would be too costly was much more reliable. In the distance, a human patrol ship passed between them and the stars, its weapon systems clearly visible even at this range. The galaxy had learned to fear those weapons, and in that fear had found a more stable peace than it had ever known. The humans had brought war to the galaxy, and in doing so, had brought lasting peace, as long as no one was foolish enough to test human resolve. Looking at Captain Chen's calm, professional demeanor as she sipped her coffee and watched the patrol routes, Zixtal was certain that no one would be that foolish, at least not twice.